Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, and I want to talk about how to permanently solve the problem of the American unhoused, previously known as American homelessness. So when I say unhoused, I mean homeless. That's the term we used to use. I think unhoused is a better way to term this, right? This video is part of a playlist. I'm going to talk about the show The Regime, and you have to understand my position on the regime before you can understand this. So you have to watch this in context to the rest of this. So I watched the show The Regime, Kate Winslet's The Regime, on HBO Max, and I'm convinced, in my humble opinion, that show cost $50 million, right? And it is abominable. It makes me weep that $50 million was wasted on that piece of art, which is political satire, right? It's unrecognizable what the point of the show is. It the entire show is simply a massive attention grab and an act of selfishness from Kate Winslet. The show would not have been made without her. I'm convinced of that. And it's pure utter garbage. It is just the absolute waste of American resources that has ever. It is the biggest waste of American resources that I have ever seen in this decade. Right. And $50 million was spent on this, right? And I'm convinced of it. I don't think it costed. I think it probably cost between 75 and 100 million and 150 million dollars, but I'm convinced $50 million was wasted on this piece of garbage show. And there are people who are unhoused in America, and I'm like, if we spent $50 million on this outrageously selfish action of Kate Winslet, we could have housed thousands, right? And I think we need to now put the problem of the unhoused on the American corporate structure, right? And we need to privatize every single service that the American government gives. It needs to all be privatized. And I think we could have taken the $50 million that was spent on the regime, and I think we could have solved, and I'm going to give this structure, the unhoused problem in Pennsylvania alone. And then once we've done that, once we've acknowledged that every single one of these large corporate organizations could house all the unhoused people in each state, and there are easily 50 American global. There are easily 50 global houses that are, 50 global corporations that could handle the unhoused problem in each state, at least for 1 year. And that if we got this program up and running, we could. The regime convinces me that we are choosing to have the unhoused problem in America. Because I live in Pennsylvania, and I believe that the $50 million, if you had taken that $50 million, if the regime was never made and HBO Max just gave that $50 million to Pennsylvania, it could have housed every single unhoused Pennsylvanian, and we could absolutely do the same thing in every 50 states, just choosing a different American global corporation, right? And it is abominable to me that this piece of garbage art is taking space and people are sleeping on the streets. Like these need to be traded, right? And I think Vivek Ramaswamy can launch this. He has a platform where he can take the idea I'm about to give and make it a reality, right? Just talk to the people in the Republican Party that he has leverage over at this point. Not leverage, influence with. That's a better way of saying it. And get this done. All right, so here's how we would do it. So first of all, we would call the program Red, White, and Housed. Okay, and here's what you would do. Immediately, the U.S. government would connect and say the U.S. government is by eminent domaining taking one state park in Pennsylvania, and we're giving that entire state park to the unhoused. There will be 10 large heated tents. And then there will be 1,000 individual tents where two people can sleep, right? And the large tents will each sleep 100, and then so basically, and so there'll be room for 2,000 homeless. 2,000 homeless, okay? The corporation would come in. At this point, it would be the corporation that owns HBO Max. They would give the 50 million, and then what they would do is they would erect these large heated tents, okay, where communal, and then there would be 1,000 individual tents, each that could house 2 people, right? And actually, so that means it's 10, yeah. So each of the large tents would take 100. That's 1,000. Each of the large heated tents would take 100. That's 1,000. 3,000. This could house 3,000 people, right? Actually, it would put them in tents, right? But each one of those tents would have a camera, and then there would be security, right? And those security sweeps would go through, and each of them would be visually checked once per hour, right? And anyone in any of those tents could just walk outside, wave their hand, and immediately security would be sent, right? So why would we have these large open tents and these individual tents? Well, often what happens with the unhoused, that I've seen in Philadelphia, and actually from everything let's put it this way: many the Philadelphia Inquirer has done multiple stories on the unhoused here. Many of them struggle with recreational substances, which they struggle to take at the correct amounts, right? So many of them are going to be coming off of recreational substances, and that is going to be difficult. And so these large heated tents could be, essentially it would be exactly like a war triage, right? You'd be bringing in people who are recovering from uncontrolled recreational substance use, right? And they're essentially going to be going through, they'll be going through the bad symptoms of getting off of those substances, right? And these tents, it would just be people laying in bed, just going through, essentially through detox, right? And the 50 million, the corporations would be responsible to supply Gatorade, to supply hydration, to supply food, and then just, and say, hey, any and all, if you're unhoused, just come here, we'll put you up, right? You're going to go, and actually you're going to spend a week in a tent, right? And if you are showing that you're trying to get to the point where you can stay in one of the individual tents, then a week later you'll get one of the individual tents, right? But for right now, you'll essentially be in the detox tents, right? And the corporations are going to spend the money to give you what you need. And that's where that 50 million would come from. $50 million would have done this for 1 year, right? And all that and it would have helped America, because America would have never been subjected to the regime, right? Which is the most selfish piece of Hollywood art I've ever seen, and wasted the American resource of this Sunday 9 p.m. slot, right? And it hurt the legacy and the momentum of that, right? So very important to and then that would be it, and you'd have 3. And here's the thing: at this point, I think what we would see a few things. One, I think a lot of people would be housed, and then there would remain people who are unhoused, right? However, this is one thing I think is interesting. Who would remain unhoused? People who desire to live unhoused. I think there's a certain percentage of Americans who desire to live unhoused, right? And at that point, we can say, okay, we recognize that this is, they had the opportunity to go to a very nice, safe, a piece of land that was given to them, that was heated, where all their hydration, all their clothing needs, all their shelter needs, all their food needs, all their basic needs were given. And if anybody is living unhoused at this point, it's because they're choosing to. And then we can have that conversation and say, hey, what do we do with the percentage of Americans who choose to live unhoused? Because then we would have reached that point. So we would model this in Pennsylvania and then do it all over the United States of America. This is a sound plan that Vivek Ramaswamy can put forward today, right? That will privatize red, white, and housed, right? And make sure that no American ever has to live unhoused. And I'm convinced right now that seeing $50 million, in my humble opinion, wasted on the absolute most selfish piece of Hollywood art I have ever seen, It is galling to me that that show was given this American resource, this Sunday 9 p.m. slot. It's so destructive to American resources that I truly believe the government should get involved and say we're not going to allow you to waste $50 million on garbage art for one Hollywood person when this could have housed many, right? So that's, I think that would be the correct use, and I think Vivek can move on this immediately. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.